The email hit my inbox at 7:01 a.m. on a rainy Thursday, before I'd even poured my first cup of coffee. Subject line, "Let's put our best foot forward," complete with 3 sparkling shoe emojis. Classic Tiffany. I skimmed it once, then again. Corporate fluff disguised as policy. But there it was, buried in the second paragraph like a landmine. Effective immediately, all employees are expected to comply with revised appearance guidelines, particularly concerning textile choices deemed non-traditional. I didn't need a memo to tell me who that was aimed at. No one else in compliance wore tailored wool trousers or structured jackets with clean lines. The others floated in every morning wrapped in sagging khakis, shiny synthetic blends, or discount pencil skirts that rode up like they had a grudge. But me, I dressed like I gave a damn. And apparently, that made me dangerous. Because Tiffany, 32, HR manager, professional grudge holder in nude heels, didn't like women she couldn't control. It started months ago when she accidentally saw my salary. I'll never forget the way her smile froze when she realized I wasn't some junior analyst making entry-level crumbs. Ever since, it felt like I had a target on my back. By 10:13 a.m., Tiffany strolled by my desk, her signature cloud of vanilla body spray arriving a full second before she did. She hovered, then leaned in with that fake friend voice of hers. "Oh, hey, Mia," she said, dragging out my name like she was tasting it. "Just wanted to check in. You had a chance to review the updated dress policy?" I didn't even look up. I did. Nothing in there applies to me. 2 seconds later, like clockwork, Brenda appeared. Tiffany's shadow. The kind of woman who'd rat out her own mother for a pat on the head. "We're really trying to create a cohesive visual identity, you know?" Brenda chirped. "Sometimes, older styles send mixed messages." I finally met their eyes. My voice didn't change. "Mixed messages? To whom? The Pentagon?" Brenda's grin wobbled. Tiffany smirked. "Just making sure we're aligned," Tiffany said sweetly. "Some people don't realize when they're pushing the line." I set my coffee down. I don't push lines. I write them. Section 12A of the Federal Compliance Manual supersedes any HR memo. I'm sure you read that. If you read it all. Her jaw locked. The smile stayed, but it never touched her eyes. And just like that, they turned and walked off, whispering like they'd just dethroned a prom queen. I watched them go, and felt that familiar cold settle in my chest. I'd been here before. When a manager forgot my promotion paperwork. When I trained a junior analyst who got bumped ahead of me 6 months later. Office politics wasn't new. But this felt different. This was reckless. And reckless people are dangerous. At 2:04 p.m., Tiffany came back. Same perfume, same tight smile. This time, she circled my desk like a shark that had read too many LinkedIn articles about leadership energy. "Oh, wow," she said, voice syrupy and loud enough for Brenda to hear 3 desks over. "Those pants are interesting." I blinked, slow. Charcoal gray trousers, tailored. Subtle herringbones so fine it might as well have been woven by ghosts. Tiffany had apparently appointed herself fashion police of the fabric world. "I wasn't sure if you'd seen the handbook update," she went on. "Section 14B. You did read it, right?" I took a sip of my coffee. I edited it. Found 3 typos, by the way. Brenda let out a snort. Tiffany fake laughed and cocked her hip. "It's about cohesion," Brenda chirped again. "Team synergy starts with fabric integrity." I turned my chair toward them, my spine perfectly straight. "Is this a formal HR complaint?" Tiffany blinked. "Oh no, just a conversation. Woman to woman." "Good," I said, "because my contract doesn't include fake conversations about personal taste pretending to be policy." Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Mark, my supervisor, lingering in the hallway, watching. He met my eyes, and then bolted. Coward. Tiffany leaned in, dropping her voice but keeping it fake sweet. "Just making sure we're seen as reliable professionals, especially with sensitive government work coming up. We wouldn't want the wrong impression. And there it was. So she did know something was brewing. Or thought she did. I looked her dead in the eyes. The Department of Defense cares about classified data, not pinstripes. Her smile cracked. Barely. Before she turned and walked off. But I knew. This wasn't about dress codes. It was about control. And control? Control came at a cost. I glanced down at my purse, where my black DSS-issued badge sat zipped inside, silent and waiting. Clearance level. Top. The kind of clearance that took 6 months of vetting, home inspections, background checks. The kind of clearance this entire $50 million contract depended on. I smiled to myself. I didn't expect the official calendar invite to hit so soon. 3:12 p.m. Subject line: HR matter. Immediate attention required. No body text. No explanation. Just a time slot. 15 minutes from now, in room 3C. I stared at the screen. For a moment, I thought about declining. But declining wasn't an option. Not in a company where we value open dialogue was corporate code for comply or else. I locked my terminal. The soft beep of my security badge felt louder than usual. And stood up. It felt like standing for my own execution. The office around me hummed with fake busyness. Eyes flicked up, then darted away. Everyone knew. They always did. I walked past the interns pretending to scroll through spreadsheets, past Mark's office door. Blinds down, lights off. Of course. When I stepped into room 3C, Tiffany was already seated at the head of the table, iPad angled just so, like she was hosting a TED Talk on passive-aggressive management. To her right sat Brenda, nervously twirling a pink gel pen. To the left, Cal Morton, Senior Operations Manager. The same Cal who once congratulated me on a 70-page audit summary by saying, "That's a lot of words for compliance stuff." He looked wildly uncomfortable, like he'd been promised a quick witness role, not front-row seats at a firing. "Mia," Tiffany said with that faux warm smile. "Thanks for joining us." "I was ordered to," I replied, sitting down with the kind of calm you practice in front of a mirror. Brenda cleared her throat and unfolded a printed script, literal script, hands shaking just enough to make the paper crinkle. "This is a formal termination meeting," she began, voice rehearsed. "Conducted in accordance with corporate procedure outlined in Section 8B of the Employee Accountability Guidelines." I blinked once. Tiffany jumped in, eyes gleaming. "Due to repeated noncompliance with the updated dress code and a pattern of insubordination, the company has no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately." Brenda slid a 2-page document across the table. Final notice stamped across the top in bold red letters. I scanned it. My name, employee ID, defiance. That word appeared 3 times. No mention of my clearance, no mention of performance metrics. Nothing about the 6-figure contract I'd been shepherding for months. Just buzzwords like team cohesion and cultural alignment. I felt nothing. No anger, no panic. Just a hollow vacuum where belief used to be. Belief that competence still mattered in this place. "I see," I said quietly. "So, just to be clear, I'm being terminated for dress code violations?" Tiffany nodded. "Among other behavioral concerns, yes." "Such as?" Brenda fumbled. "Tone, resistance, comments perceived as undermining leadership." Tiffany cut in, her voice low and sharp. "Let's not make this harder than it has to be." I gave a dry laugh. No humor, just air. "You already did that when you turned woven wool into a crime." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "We have standards," Tiffany said. "You have obsessions," I replied. "I have clearance." That landed like a punch. Tiffany opened her mouth, but nothing clever came out. A flicker of movement caught my eye, the glass wall behind them. On my locked terminal, a notification pulsed softly. DSS, System Check-in Overdue. Tiffany noticed it. smirked. Guess you won't be needing that anymore. I said nothing. I just stared at the blinking alert. They hadn't connected the dots. Not yet. Brenda spoke, softer now. Someone from IT will escort you out. Please collect your belongings. I stood, smooth, calm. Wouldn't want to cause a security breach, I said. Tiffany gave a tight little laugh. Let's not be dramatic, Mia. I turned toward the door, then stopped, looked back at them. You just fired the only person in this building who knows how to keep your government contract from collapsing like a dollar store tent. 3 faces, blank, uncomprehending. I smiled, slow and sharp. Enjoy your fabric integrity. The walk back to my desk felt longer than any walk I'd taken in that building. I kept my head high. I didn't slam my keyboard. I didn't send a flaming email. I just packed. They gave me one of those insultingly small cardboard boxes, the kind with barely enough space for a mug and a framed photo. Sympathy-sized. I started with the basics. The photo of my sister and me at Arches National Park. My legal pad, full of compliance notes and procurement deadlines. The small cactus I'd kept alive on my desk for 3 years, despite Brenda's overwatering attempts. I left the rest. The spreadsheets, the half-finished reports, the encrypted data logs blinking quietly on my monitor. They'd need those. And without me, they wouldn't know what any of it meant. At the bottom of my desk drawer sat my black DSS clearance badge, the one I'd earned after 6 months of vetting, background checks, and surprise home inspections. I picked it up slowly, like I was holding a live wire. It wasn't flashy, just a slim black card with a barely visible RFID chip and a number printed at the bottom. A number that unlocked federal databases they didn't even know existed. I slipped it into its protective sleeve. The one labeled Property of DSS, Do Not Discard. I zipped it into my bag, heart steady. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I stood box in hand and made my way toward the exit. First stop, marketing. No one said a word. Rachel looked up, blinked, and immediately dropped her eyes back to her screen. Jason gave a quick nod, the kind you give someone you barely know in the frozen aisle at Trader Joe's. Next, accounting. One of the interns mouthed, "I'm so sorry," eyes wide like I'd just been diagnosed with something terminal. I gave a polite, dead-eyed smile. By the time I reached my cubicle, Mark was standing there, hands stuffed in his pockets like a guilty teenager. "Hey, Mia," he stammered. "Sorry to see you go." I tilted my head. "Are you?" His mouth opened, then closed. After a beat, he gave a quick nod. "Well, good luck out there." I stared at his back as he scurried off down the hallway, straight into the warm safety of corporate cowardice. I packed the last of my things in silence. No tears, no trembling, just a slow, simmering pressure crawling up my spine. The weight of public humiliation. Not loud, not explosive. The quiet kind. The kind that settles deep in your bones and echoes with every fake. "Are you okay?" I took the elevator down alone. At the front desk, the IT guy, I think his name was Dylan, waited for me. He looked everywhere but at my face as he handed over a sealed envelope. "Final paycheck. COBRA info," he mumbled. "Lovely," I said, dropping it into the box like trash. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. I turned to face the lobby. I watched it shrink away, the fake plants, the fake smiles, the fake everything, until the doors slid shut. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even mad. But something inside me shifted. A cold, sharp clarity. They thought this was over. They thought they'd handled the problem. They had no idea what they'd just triggered. I was halfway across the lobby, the envelope crumpling in my box, when the glass doors swung open behind me. It wasn't a client, or an interview candidate fumbling with a resume. It was 2 people, a man and a woman, matching dark suits, clean lines, quiet, confident movements. No logos, no name tags, Just black lapel pins with a small silver ring. The unmistakable insignia of the Defense Security Service. The woman walked half a step ahead, scanning the room like she was casing it. The man flanked her, posture tight as a coiled spring. They weren't here for onboarding. I froze. I'd seen DSS agents before, during my clearance process. They didn't knock unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. They stopped at the front desk. The woman leaned in, voice low but firm. "We need to speak with Walter Phelps, head of security, and Brian Denning, your CEO, immediately." The receptionist blinked. "They're in meetings. Can I—" The man cut in. "Not a request." The receptionist fumbled for the phone like her hands had gone numb. I stayed where I was, the box heavy in my arms, my pulse suddenly loud in my ears. I didn't know what had triggered this. I didn't know how fast word had traveled. But I knew one thing. The government had noticed, and the people in that building were about to find out exactly what they'd done. I stood perfectly still, box in hand, breath shallow. I watched as the receptionist hung up the phone, her face pale, her fingers trembling slightly as she set the receiver back in place. They'll be down in just a minute," she whispered to the agents. The woman gave a single nod. The man didn't even blink. I knew their kind. They weren't here to have a friendly chat about policy. DSS didn't do friendly chats. I shifted slightly, adjusting the strap of my purse over my shoulder. From the corner of my eye, I caught the man scanning the lobby. His gaze swept past me, lingered for half a second, then moved on. He didn't recognize me. Not yet. I stared straight ahead, willing my heart to stay steady. Whatever happened next, I wasn't the one in trouble. I'd followed protocol. Every line, every clause, every absurd security check. I'd colored inside the lines so precisely that if they'd wanted to find fault, they'd have had to draw new lines themselves. A sharp ding cut through the air. The executive elevator, not the regular one. The doors opened, fast, controlled, and out stepped Tiffany. She was trying to walk like nothing was wrong. Chin up, posture stiff, but her face, pale, too pale. The kind of pale that comes from realizing you've just kicked a hornet's nest with a baseball bat. Brenda stumbled out behind her, clipboard nowhere in sight. They both moved fast, cutting across the lobby with the fake confidence of people hoping they weren't about to lose everything. Tiffany didn't even glance at me until she passed. Her eyes flicked toward mine, for a second, and then jerked away like I'd burned her. I didn't smile. I didn't even blink. I just watched. She disappeared into a conference room with the two agents, the door clicking shut behind them. The lobby fell quiet again. That strange, humming silence you only hear in offices after something explodes. I could see heads popping up behind cubicles, pretending to look for printer paper or stretch their backs. Anything but openly admit they were desperate to know what was happening. The voices inside the room started low, then sharper. I couldn't make out the words, but fragments floated out, jagged as broken glass. Unauthorized access, clearance breach, protocol violation. I stood there, box in hand, my pulse flattening out into something calm. Like a wire stretched so tight it didn't even tremble. It didn't take long. Maybe 5 minutes. And then he arrived. Brian Denning, the CEO, sweating, breathless. Necktie yanked crooked like he'd tried to strangle himself on the elevator ride down. He bulldozed straight past the receptionist, ignored the front desk, eyes locked on me like I was the last lifeboat on the Titanic. "Mia," he said, smiling, too wide, too forced. "Would you mind stepping into my office? Just for a quick chat?" I didn't move. "I no longer work here," I said, loud enough for half the lobby to hear. "You'll have to make an appointment." His jaw worked, throat bobbing as if he couldn't decide whether to plead or order. "Please, it'll only take a minute." I stood, slow, deliberate. I leveled my eyes at him, that sharp edge of calm I'd been perfecting for years settling into place. I'm sure your team can handle it, I said. After all, it's just fabric, right? The color drained from his face like someone had pulled the plug. I brushed past him. No rush, no glance back, just steady steps toward the glass doors. Behind me, I heard the conference room door open again. Tiffany came out, shaking, hands clasped together like she was trying to hold herself upright. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I knew the look on her face. I'd seen it before. The exact moment a person realizes they've set a fire they can't put out. She started to say something. Some breathless excuse. Some corporate speak defense. But I didn't give her the stage. I kept walking. I didn't need to see their faces. I'd already seen them. And they looked exactly like Justice. I'd barely made it 5 steps across the lobby when I heard the footsteps. Not the shuffle of interns, not the nervous tap of Brenda's kitten heels. No, these footsteps were steady, controlled. The kind of walk that didn't rush because it never had to. I turned just as the DSS agents approached. The woman, Agent Rossi, judging by the name on her lapel pin, gave me a brief nod. "Miss Reynolds?" she asked, her voice low, even. I raised an eyebrow. "Still am, unless you're here to revoke that too." The man, Agent Miller, gave the faintest hint of a smile. "We understand today's events were unexpected," he said. "We'd like a moment of your time." Behind them, I caught sight of Brian and Tiffany standing near the ficus plant, both looking like they'd been hollowed out from the inside. Brian's dress shirt clung to him with damp streaks of sweat. Tiffany's eyes were red-rimmed, her hands shaking slightly. They weren't moving. They weren't speaking. They weren't in charge anymore. I nodded once. "Of course." The agents flanked me, one on each side, but not in a way that felt hostile. More like respect, or maybe precaution. We didn't head into the conference room where Tiffany and Brian had been cornered moments before. Instead, Agent Rossi guided us toward the seating area near reception, out in the open, where the entire floor could see. A message. I wasn't being detained. I wasn't in trouble. I was the one they wanted cooperation from. Agent Miller spoke first. "We're reviewing the protocol breach related to your termination. Your clearance record is, frankly, impeccable. Your work on the Q3 classified data audit flagged attention at the federal level." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I followed procedure. Rossi nodded back. "Exactly. Which is why we're hoping you'll assist with the next phase of the project. The contract still stands. The contractor, however..." She let the words trail off, glancing toward Brian, who now looked like a man watching his own career slip through his fingers. Brian took a slow step forward, his voice trembling with that special blend of desperation and corporate panic. "Mia, let's be reasonable here." I looked at him, dead on. "Reasonable?" He rushed in, words tripping over each other. "Obviously, mistakes were made. On both sides. I want to formally offer you your position back." I didn't move. "And a raise," he added quickly. 15%, senior title. We'll put it in writing right now." The entire lobby fell silent. Even the receptionist had stopped typing. A junior exec outside the glass doors paused mid-vape. I tilted my head, letting the words hang there for a moment. "The salary you can afford?" I said slowly. "Wouldn't even cover the therapy I'd need to forget working for you." Dead silence. Brian opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He turned toward the agents. Maybe we could work something out?" Agent Rossi shook her head, calm but final. "We'll handle this. The government still needs this project completed, just not by you." I allowed myself the smallest smile. For the first time all day, it felt good. Not revenge, not triumph, just right. Agent Miller gave me a nod. "We have a field office nearby. You'll be compensated for your time, of course." Brian looked like he'd been punched in the throat. Tiffany, still hovering nearby, Looked like she might faint. Mascara smudged, lips parted like she was about to argue. But nothing came. Brenda? Nowhere in sight. Probably hiding in a supply closet, clutching her clipboard like a security blanket. I adjusted the strap on my purse. "Let's go," I said. As we walked toward the exit, the entire office seemed to hold its breath. I didn't look back, because I didn't need to. They weren't the ones walking out with the agents. I was. We stepped out into the afternoon heat, Agent Rossi on my left, Agent Miller on my right. And for a brief moment, it felt like the whole world had shifted beneath my feet. Not because I'd been fired, not because I'd walked out in front of half the office, but because, for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying their weight on my back. I was free. We crossed the parking lot in silence. Halfway to their government-issued black sedan, Agent Miller's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression tightening by half a degree. "1 minute," he said quietly. He turned on his heel and walked briskly back toward the building. I didn't follow. Neither did Agent Rossi. We both stood there, watching as the glass doors swung open again, swallowing him back into the corporate mausoleum I'd just escaped. Inside, the office fell into that eerie kind of silence I'd come to know too well. The silence of people waiting for the sky to fall. Through the glass, I watched Agent Miller stride past the front desk, past the frozen receptionist, straight into the executive conference room. No knock. No hesitation. Brian was inside, hands on his hips, trying hard to project authority he no longer had. Tiffany hovered behind him, smaller somehow, like the air had been sucked out of her. Miller dropped a manila folder onto the glass table. The conversation started low. Brian's mouth moved faster than his words. Tiffany's eyes darted like a trapped animal. Then, Miller opened the folder. I couldn't hear the words. I didn't need to. I watched Brian's face change, not gradually, but in a single snap. First confusion, then recognition, then devastation. He sat down hard, like someone had pulled the bones out of him. Tiffany backed up until her shoulders hit the glass wall. Her lips moved. I could read it even from here. "How?" No answer came. When Miller stepped back out, he walked like a man who had just delivered a death sentence. I raised an eyebrow as he approached. "All good?" He gave a single nod. "They've been notified." "Of?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Full federal audit, breach of protocol. Contract invalidated. They're under immediate review." I exhaled, slow and steady. Behind him, Brian followed, eyes hollow, face damp with the sweat of a man who knew exactly what this meant. $50 million in government contracts. Gone. Future federal partnerships? Gone. Company reputation? Shredded beyond repair. And Tiffany? She trailed behind Brian, mascara streaked, face pale, her world unraveling thread by thread. She didn't look at me. Couldn't. Miller and Rossi flanked me again as we walked toward the car. Rossi broke the silence first. "You handled that well." "I handled it quietly," I replied. "There's a difference." Rossi smiled. A real one. She reached into her coat and handed me a card. Simple. Cream-colored. No title. Just a name, a direct number, and a faint DSS seal embossed like a silent promise. "We subcontract oversight roles," she said, her tone deliberate. "Especially when primary contractors are collapse." I turned the card over between my fingers. "The pay better?" Rossi's smile deepened. "Better and cleaner." I gave a small laugh. "You work for the government. Clean isn't exactly the word I'd use." "We work with people who understand protocol," she said. "People who don't flinch when idiots in HR try to wield power they don't understand. People who know when to stay quiet. And when not to." I slipped the card into my pocket next to my badge. We didn't shake hands. Didn't make promises. Just a quiet understanding. By the time I reached my car, the sky had started to clear. The clouds pulled apart in soft streaks, and the sun cut through like a spotlight on a stage I'd finally stepped off. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. They'd spend months picking up the pieces, trying to explain how they'd fumbled a federal contract over a pair of dress pants. Trying to rewrite history in performance reviews and board meetings. But I'd be gone. And they'd never forget my name. I unlocked my car, tossed the envelope with my final paycheck onto the passenger seat, and sat for a moment, just breathing in the quiet. I wasn't just walking away from a job. I was stepping into the world I'd built, thread by thread, in the shadows of people who thought they owned me. They didn't. They never did. Sign this or I'll ruin your career. The words cracked through the conference room like a gunshot. My new boss, Nathan Cole, didn't just push the resignation letter toward me. He slammed it down, hard enough that the glass tabletop trembled. His fingers, long and rigid, pressed against the edge of the paper as if daring me to refuse. I stared at the typed words. Voluntary resignation, effective immediately. The walls of the sleek conference room seemed to shrink around me, the air thick with tension. Just outside the glass, employees passed by, oblivious. Nathan's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. Be smart, Lisa. You won't find work in this industry again if you cross me. I forced my face blank, even as a dozen memories hit me at once. Late nights perfecting reports he took credit for. Ideas stolen in boardrooms while he smirked like a king. And just last week, catching discrepancies in client invoices. Numbers that didn't make sense. Numbers that Nathan didn't want me looking at. I should have been scared. Maybe I was a little. But more than fear, something sharper stirred inside me. Because what Nathan didn't know was, I'd been preparing for this moment for weeks. I lifted the pen slowly, heart pounding, and signed. But not before my eyes flicked to one phrase in the middle of the standard form. I changed a single word. One word. The difference between a clean exit and a legal time bomb. Before I take you further into this story, you need to understand something critical. Power isn't about titles. It's about knowing exactly when and how to push back. If you've ever felt like you had no choice, if you've been cornered by someone with more power, stay with me. Because what I'm about to share isn't just about revenge. It's about knowing your worth when someone tries to erase it. My name is Lisa Grant. I'm 35, single, financial operations manager with a decade of experience in corporate compliance. And no, I'm not a risk taker. I plan everything. I color code my calendar. I read every contract twice. And I grew up watching my father run a small accounting firm where every decimal mattered. Always double-check the details, Lisa. He used to say, the smallest clause can change the whole outcome. I lived by that. It's how I climbed my way up from a junior analyst role to managing multi-million-dollar portfolios. It's also why I noticed within 3 months of Nathan's arrival, things weren't adding up. Nathan Cole transferred in from the East Coast with a reputation for shaking things up. Tall, charismatic, ruthless, the kind of man who made deals with a handshake and a threat wrapped in a smile. At first, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. But then, the cracks appeared. It started small. A bonus report that included unauthorized figures, an expense claim with a vendor I didn't recognize. At first, I assumed it was a mistake, until I cross-checked old records and realized the numbers had been manipulated. I brought it up once, carefully. These transfers don't align with our policy. I think we should flag them. Nathan didn't even look up from his laptop. Not your concern. Just process them. I didn't argue. I started documenting. Emails, screenshots, printed reports. Every discrepancy, every shady approval. Because people like Nathan count on you being too scared or too compliant to stand your ground. Then came the performance review. After 8 years of exceeding expectations, suddenly I was labeled difficult, lacking team spirit. And I knew exactly where this was heading. He was setting me up to fail. The ultimatum came 2 weeks later. A surprise meeting. No agenda, no HR, just Nathan, the letter, and the threat. I signed. With a word changed, with everything I needed in place. When Nathan snatched the paper from me, his grin said he thought he'd won. I stood, met his eyes, and said quietly, "I'll have my copy. Please?" His grin flickered. "HR will follow up," he said, waving me off like I was nothing. I nodded, because tomorrow, HR would follow up. And Nathan Cole was about to learn what happens when you threaten someone who knows exactly how much power a single word can hold. I left the conference room without looking back. Nathan didn't even bother to watch me go. He was already typing on his phone, probably messaging HR to finalize my exit. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. That's not how you win. I walked calmly to my office, gathered my things into a single box, and placed a neatly labeled envelope on my desk. It contained everything I'd been collecting for the last 2 months. Records of altered transactions. Emails where Nathan ordered me to process without question. Copies of the expense reports with inflated vendor payments. Screenshots of system changes traced back to Nathan's login. And of course, a copy of the resignation letter I'd just signed, where I had crossed out voluntary and written in forced resignation under duress. It was legal language I'd learned from weeks of reading employment law cases after work. One phrase, enough to turn a resignation into a potential wrongful termination claim. I slipped the envelope into my bag and checked my phone. A single message blinked on the screen. "You did it?" It was from Harper, my friend in legal, the only person who knew everything. "Yes, I'm coming now," I replied. Harper worked in Beckman and Lee, our company's retained employment law firm. We'd met in a corporate workshop 3 years ago. Unlike most corporate attorneys, Harper had a soft spot for employees who got steamrolled by toxic management. She also happened to be the one who'd told me exactly what phrase to insert into that letter. I met her at a small cafe 2 blocks from the office. She took one look at me, her sharp blue eyes scanning my expression. "You kept calm?" I nodded. She gave a satisfied smile. "Good. That's half the battle. The next half is letting HR walk straight into their own trap." I handed her the envelope. She leafed through it without speaking, only raising an eyebrow at one point. "Vendor kickbacks?" "Looks like it," I said quietly. Same 2 vendors, over and over. Both started showing up after Nathan arrived. Harper set the documents down and met my eyes. "Lisa, you realize this isn't just a wrongful dismissal case. If this holds up, it's procurement fraud, corporate liability, potential federal investigation." I didn't blink. "That's why I've got copies and backups. And yes, timestamps on everything." She exhaled, nodding. "I'll forward this to their internal legal team in the morning, after HR processes your paperwork. Don't worry. The moment they realize what you've done, they'll go into panic mode." That word, panic, stuck with me. Because Nathan? He didn't panic. He made other people panic. At least, that's what he thought. The next morning, I walked into the HR office at exactly 9 a.m., holding my boxed belongings. Tina, the HR manager, gave me a rehearsed smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lisa, thank you for coming in. We'll just finalize your paperwork and escort you out." I nodded politely. "Of course, I'll need a signed copy of the resignation acknowledgement for my records." She hesitated, flipping through her folder. "Well, actually, we'll send you a digital confirmation." "I'll wait," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'd like it signed today. That's company policy, isn't it?" She blinked, caught off guard. Yes. Give me a moment." I watched as she stepped into the HR director's office. A muted conversation followed. 30 seconds later, she reappeared. Her expression changed. tighter. The director would like to speak with you. I followed her into the office, my heart beating steady but hard. Mark Davidson, head of HR, stood behind his desk. He gestured for me to sit. And then, he dropped a single sheet of paper on the table between us. My resignation letter, with my handwritten edit staring back at him. Forced resignation under duress. His eyes lifted to mine. Lisa, what is this? I met his gaze without flinching. It's exactly what happened. I signed under threat in a closed-door meeting with no HR present. And I've documented everything. For a moment, there was silence. Then Mark cleared his throat. I see. We'll need to review this further before finalizing any paperwork. I nodded, rising to leave. I'll wait for your response. My attorney will too. As I stepped into the hallway, I saw it. A flash of movement at the far end. Nathan, standing by the elevators. He was laughing with another executive, still thinking he'd won. I walked past without acknowledging him. Because tomorrow, HR would summon him. And Nathan Cole was about to learn that the smallest word on a page could unravel everything he'd built on intimidation. The call came the next morning at 8:12 a.m. I was sipping my coffee when my phone lit up with a number I recognized. HR direct line. I took a slow breath before answering. Lisa Grant speaking. Lisa, this is Mark Davidson. His voice sounded stiffer than usual. We've reviewed the document you submitted yesterday. We'll need you to come in this morning for a formal discussion regarding your resignation and certain concerns that have been raised. I let a beat pass. Will my legal representative be welcome in this discussion? A pause. Yes, that would be advisable. I hung up, texted Harper, and met her at a coffee shop near the office by 8:45. She was already waiting, phone in hand, reading something on her tablet. They called? She asked without looking up. I nodded. Mark wants a formal discussion. Harper closed the tablet and gave a satisfied smile. Good. That means they've realized they're in deep. Let's go. We arrived at the HR floor just before 9. As we walked in, I noticed something immediately. The usual relaxed morning chatter wasn't there. People moved briskly through the halls, heads down. Doors closed a little too quickly when we passed. The atmosphere had shifted. Inside the main conference room, Mark Davidson sat at the head of the table. Next to him was Tina, her polite smile replaced by something tight and cautious. To my surprise, Pascal Green, the company's internal counsel, was also present, a man I'd only seen at company-wide meetings. Ms. Grant, Ms. Harper, thank you for coming, Mark began, his voice carefully formal. I nodded, Harper giving him a cool glance. Mark cleared his throat. We've reviewed the resignation letter and the circumstances surrounding it. We are concerned about the language you included and the allegations you've submitted. I met his eyes. I documented everything, Mark. I didn't want it to come to this. But Nathan Cole gave me no choice. He shifted uncomfortably. We've also begun an internal review of the financial discrepancies you highlighted in your supporting documents. Pascal interjected. If these discrepancies are accurate, and preliminary checks suggest they may be, this situation extends beyond employment law. There could be significant compliance violations and potential legal exposure for the company. Harper leaned forward slightly. I'm glad you recognize the seriousness. My client's priority is ensuring accountability. We expect the company to take immediate steps to address this, starting with the actions of Mr. Cole. Mark nodded, his jaw tight. Mr. Cole has been called in for a meeting later this morning. I felt my heart give a single, quiet thud. It was happening. Has he been informed of the financial review? Harper asked. Mark shook his head. Not yet. We want to hear his explanation before we take further steps. Pascal added, but rest assured, this will be handled thoroughly. I leaned back slightly, keeping my expression calm. I hope so, because I'm prepared to escalate this externally if necessary. Mark gave a shallow nod. Understood. An hour later, I was back at my desk. Or rather, at the spare workstation they'd assigned me near the compliance team. I was organizing my files when I saw him. Nathan, striding across the floor, flanked by Tina and Mark. He looked irritated, not nervous, not yet. His jaw set, his eyes sharp as always. To him, this was just another performance review. Another little fire he'd charm or threaten his way out of. But I noticed something different. People weren't smiling at him this morning. No greetings, no casual waves. They looked away. Nathan didn't seem to notice. They disappeared into the glass conference room at the end of the hall. Harper, who'd stayed close by, came to stand beside me. "He doesn't know yet," she murmured. I nodded. "He will." I watched through the glass wall as Mark slid a folder across the table. Nathan picked it up, glanced at it, and his expression shifted. The slight smirk faltered. His hand holding the paper stilled. He said something. I couldn't hear it, but Mark shook his head. Pascal leaned in, pointing to a document inside the folder. Nathan's shoulders straightened, defensive now. His mouth tightened. Harper whispered, "And there it is." A beat later, Nathan's eyes lifted and locked on me through the glass. For the first time since he'd arrived at the company, I saw it. Not irritation, not arrogance, fear. And in that exact moment, I knew. Nathan Cole's grip on this company, and on my career, had just slipped. For a man like Nathan Cole, fear wasn't a familiar feeling. He thrived on control, on making people scramble to please him. But in that glass-walled conference room, with 3 senior executives staring him down, his composure cracked. I watched as Mark spoke, his hands folded calmly on the table. Nathan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a defensive posture if I'd ever seen one. Every few seconds, his eyes darted toward Pascal, the company's counsel. From my vantage point, I couldn't hear the words, but body language tells stories louder than voices ever could. The smirk was gone. The arrogance had shifted into tightly restrained frustration. His eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward me. Once, then again. He knew. He knew I was the reason he was sitting in that chair. I stayed at my workstation, reviewing files I'd already read 3 times, waiting. I didn't need to be in the room. The facts were already speaking for me. By noon, Harper and I were called back into HR. Nathan wasn't there. But the tension in the air felt electric. Mark folded his hands on the table, his expression unreadable. "We've placed Mr. Cole on administrative leave, effective immediately, pending a full investigation." I met his eyes. "And what exactly does that mean?" Pascal answered before Mark could. "It means he's been relieved of all duties, his access revoked, and instructed not to contact any employees. Standard protocol while we investigate both the hostile work environment claims and the financial discrepancies." Harper nodded slightly. "That's a start." Mark exhaled. "We're also bringing in an independent auditing firm to review the vendor transactions." I felt a small knot in my chest loosen. Not relief, not yet, but something closer to validation. "We'll cooperate fully," I said, keeping my tone even. "I assume the investigation will include interviews with other employees?" Pascal gave a curt nod. "Yes, we've already had 2 staff members come forward this morning regarding similar experiences with Mr. Cole." Harper gave me a glance, her expression quietly approving. This wasn't just about me anymore. It never had been. That afternoon, I returned to my desk, half expecting whispers or stares. Instead, something unexpected happened. One by one, colleagues stopped by my workstation. No grand gestures, no confessions, just small comments. "Good on you, Lisa. If you ever need backup." Wish I'd said something sooner. Even Theo, a junior analyst who'd always kept his head down, dropped off a coffee and whispered, "Thanks for standing up." He used to talk to me like I was dirt. It hit me harder than I expected. For months, I'd felt isolated, like I was imagining the patterns. But now, they saw it too. Nathan's control hadn't just cracked, it had shattered. By Friday, rumors swirled like wildfire. Word spread that Nathan had been escorted from the building after trying to access restricted files. An emergency audit team set up shop on the 10th floor. Vendor contracts Nathan had pushed through were frozen for review. And more employees started speaking up, both men and women. Stories surfaced of manipulated project reports, inappropriate comments, threatened careers. Each testimony chipped away at the wall Nathan had built around himself. I spent the next week in back-to-back interviews with auditors, compliance officers, and HR representatives. I told the truth. Every detail. No exaggeration, no assumptions. Just facts. Every piece of evidence I documented matched. Every timeline aligned. And the deeper they dug, the worse it looked for Nathan. Late Friday evening, as I packed up my laptop, I got a message. Harper. Preliminary findings. Nathan's facing potential charges. You good? I stared at the screen for a long moment. I wasn't sure what I felt. Pride? Satisfaction? Maybe, but mostly a quiet sense of rightness. I typed back. I'm good. Thank you. She replied a second later. Number thank you. You didn't just protect yourself. You changed something bigger. I stared out the office window, watching the city lights flicker in the dusk. Harper was right. This wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to be another silent casualty. Nathan Cole had underestimated one simple truth. When enough people stop being afraid, even the strongest walls collapse. By Monday morning, Nathan's name had vanished from the company directory. His office, once a fortress of closed-door meetings and whispered threats, stood empty. The blinds were drawn, the nameplate removed. No announcement had been made. But in corporate environments, silence speaks volumes. People pretended not to notice. But they noticed. I returned to my new workstation in the compliance wing, still technically in limbo. HR hadn't formalized my reinstatement yet, pending investigation outcome. But unofficially, I was working, attending meetings, contributing to project reviews. I was visible again. And for the first time in months, I felt like I belonged there. The independent audit team wasted no time. By midweek, they uncovered the depth of Nathan's scheme. Inflated vendor contracts linked to companies owned by his former business partners. Falsified approval chains. Altered performance metrics on procurement reports. Over $750,000 in suspicious transactions traced directly back to Nathan's oversight. And that wasn't the worst of it. The auditors discovered email correspondence implying certain senior managers had either ignored irregularities or actively looked the other way. This wasn't just Nathan's mess. It was a company-wide blind spot. And it was about to cost them dearly. On Thursday, I was called into a leadership meeting, this time as a key participant, not a target. Aubrey Carter, the CEO herself, sat at the head of the long conference table. I'd only met her once before, during a quarterly town hall. In person, she was sharper than I remembered. Eyes that missed nothing, a quiet authority in her posture. Beside her sat Pascal, the company's general counsel, and Mark Davidson, head of HR. Harper was by my side. Aubrey spoke first. Lisa, thank you for joining us. We've reviewed the findings of both the internal investigation and the independent audit. She folded her hands. Your documentation was not only accurate, it was critical in uncovering systemic failures within our procurement oversight. I stayed silent, letting her continue. We recognize the impact this has had on you personally, and on your professional standing, and we intend to make it right. I exchanged a brief glance with Harper. This wasn't a courtesy meeting. This was a damage control move. Aubrey nodded toward Mark. We'd like to offer formal reinstatement to your previous role, with retroactive pay and a public acknowledgement of your contributions to the integrity of this company. I met her gaze evenly. And what about the others? Mark frowned slightly. I'm sorry? The other employees Nathan targeted. The ones who came forward. What happens to them? Pascal cleared his throat. We're reviewing each case individually. Rest assured, no retaliatory action will be taken against any employee who cooperated in the investigation. I nodded slowly, but I wasn't satisfied. Not yet. What changes will be made to prevent this from happening again? I asked. Aubrey leaned back slightly. We're restructuring the compliance department and implementing a mandatory ethics training program for all management. Anonymous reporting channels are being established, with oversight from an independent committee. Harper leaned forward. And Lisa's role? Aubrey gave a small, calculated smile. We'd like Lisa to lead the new compliance integrity program, reporting directly to me. The room fell silent. I felt Harper glance at me, but I kept my eyes on Aubrey. This wasn't the victory I'd imagined. It was bigger. It wasn't just about reclaiming my job. It was about shaping the system I'd nearly been destroyed by. I took a slow breath. I'll accept, with one condition. Aubrey's eyebrows lifted. Name it. That every person who came forward gets the same protection I did. No exceptions, no quiet demotions. And that this company issues a formal statement, not to praise me, but to acknowledge that silence enabled this to happen. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Aubrey gave a slow nod. Agreed. That afternoon, Harper and I walked out of the building together. You could have named your price, she said, glancing sideways at me. I shook my head. This was never about a paycheck. It was about stopping it from happening again. Harper smiled. You know, most people cave before it gets to this point. They settle. They disappear. I met her gaze, the weight of the last few months settling somewhere deep inside me. Then maybe it's time more of us stop disappearing. 2 weeks later, the official announcement went out. Beckman & Lee implements new compliance integrity program, led by Lisa Grant, head of corporate integrity. It was a sanitized corporate press release full of words like transparency, accountability, and renewed commitment to ethical leadership. But between the lines, everyone inside the company knew the truth. Nathan Cole wasn't coming back, and the culture that had quietly enabled people like him wasn't coming back either. The day the memo went public, I stood at the edge of the crowded lobby, watching employees skim their emails on phones and tablets. The reactions were subtle. A few exchanged glances. 1 or 2 gave quiet nods. No applause. No banners. That was fine by me. Real change doesn't come with a fanfare. It comes with trust earned over time. My first act in the new role was to hold an open-door session for every employee who wanted to speak. No management present, no notes taken. It wasn't a strategy meeting. It wasn't a PR stunt. It was a listening session. And they came. From junior analysts to longtime project managers, they trickled in, one by one, then in small groups. Some shared stories of minor grievances. Some shared real fears they'd buried for years. A few simply said, "Thank you." By the end of the first week, I'd spoken to over 50 people. Some left the room lighter than they'd entered. Others left with my promise. This won't be ignored. I thought stepping into this role would feel like vindication, but it didn't. It felt like responsibility. Harper summed it up best during one of our late-night calls. When you stand up, people assume you want revenge. They don't realize sometimes you're just tired of watching the wrong people win. She was right. Nathan's story didn't end quietly. A formal investigation revealed that his financial manipulations stretched back to his previous company. Charges were filed. His name hit industry headlines, not as a rising star, but as a cautionary tale. I never heard from him again. No emails, no threats, nothing. And I didn't need to. Some battles are won not by destroying your opponent, but by refusing to let them destroy you. 3 months into my new role, I got called into Aubrey's office. She closed the door behind me, a rare gesture for a CEO, and motioned for me to sit. "I wanted to thank you again," she said quietly. "Not just for standing your ground, but for challenging us to be better." I gave a small nod. I didn't do it alone. Aubrey smiled faintly. That's what makes it matter. She paused, folding her hands on the desk. We're considering rolling out the Compliance Integrity Program company-wide, including our overseas branches. And I want you to lead that expansion. I blinked. That wasn't just a promotion. It was a seismic shift. I need time to think, I said honestly. Of course. I stood to leave, but something made me stop at the door. Aubrey, people don't speak up because they're afraid nothing will change. Or worse, that speaking up will make them a target. She met my eyes. I know. Let's prove them wrong. Her smile softened. Let's. That night, I walked home through the city streets. Cool air on my face, the distant hum of traffic in my ears. I thought about the first time I'd sat across from Nathan in that conference room. How small I'd felt. How alone. And how different this felt now. Because standing up didn't ruin me. It didn't end my career. It reshaped it. In the end, this wasn't a story about revenge. It was about reclaiming the space people tried to push me out of. It was about showing others that silence isn't the only option. It was about knowing the difference between walking away and standing your ground when it matters most. And maybe it was about one simple truth my father taught me when I was young. The smallest details change the biggest outcomes. One word on a resignation letter. One choice to speak up. One refusal to stay silent. Those choices didn't just change my career. They changed the culture around me. And if there's one thing I want you to remember from my story, it's this. Power doesn't belong to those who threaten you. It belongs to those who refuse to be threatened. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you've ever faced a moment where you wondered if standing up was worth the risk, I hope you'll remember. Sometimes the smallest action can create a ripple no one sees coming. And sometimes that ripple becomes a wave.